Subscribe to Ancient Absurdity.
All right, legends. Before we start rewriting everything you thought you knew about human history, hit subscribe and join Ancient Absurdity, the only channel that explains civilization's weirdest moments without falling asleep halfway through. Because today, we're diving into the story of how dogs basically invented civilization. Yes, dogs. Those drooling, zoomy-prone freeloaders who somehow went from scavenging our trash to inheriting our sofas. And here's the crazy part. We didn't domesticate them. They domesticated us. So grab your nearest canine or emotionally equivalent roommate, smash like, and let's travel back. About 30,000 years. Boom. You've just woken up in the late Pleistocene. You're a Paleolithic hunter. You smell like fermented mammoth. And you're surrounded by ice, wolves, and bad decisions. Civilization doesn't exist yet. But your first coworker is about to show up, wagging its tail. Picture this. A pack of grey wolves somewhere in Ice Age Eurasia. Most of them want nothing to do with humans. We're loud, we stink, and we keep setting things on fire. But a few curious ones start hanging around our camps. Why? Because humans are sloppy eaters. We drop bones, and wolves love free food. Archaeologists call this commensal domestication, when animals start benefiting from human waste before we even notice. Around 30,000, 15,000 BCE, this uneasy dinner arrangement slowly turned into the first partnership between species. The wolves that barked less and tolerated humans more got fed. The ones that didn't got speared. Over generations, natural selection favored the chill wolves, smaller, friendlier, with rounder faces and shorter snouts. The first proto-dogs. Humans, in return, got early warning systems, garbage disposal, and emotional support. The wolves got leftovers and heat from the fire. Both thought they were winning. Congratulations, humanity. You just invented friendship. By accident. Now it's 20,000 BCE. You're asleep in your mammoth hide tent, dreaming of inventing the wheel someday, when a wolf-turned dog starts barking. You wake up, grab a stick, and realize a saber-toothed cat was sneaking into camp. The dog just saved your life. That bark, that loud, annoying, miraculous sound, became our first alarm system. Archaeologists found ancient footprints in caves where human and dog tracks overlap, suggesting shared shelter and protection. This is the origin of the Mutual Defense Pact. We fed them, and they guarded us. Eventually, humans started selecting for traits like alertness and loyalty. You can see this in Natufian sites from around 12,000 BCE in the Levant, burials where dogs and humans lie side by side. Some even show evidence that the dog was killed intentionally to be buried with its owner, a ritual bond stronger than most modern marriages. Dogs were the first guards, the first soldiers, and probably the first thing to interrupt sleep since mosquitoes. Without them, half of early humanity would have been surprise dinner for predators. Civilization owes its night shift to a barking roommate. Here's something anthropology won't tell you directly, but the data's there. Prehistoric humans with dogs were more attractive. Not because of Instagram filters, because dogs signaled competence and resources. In burials from Germany, Bonn Oberkassel, 14,000 BCE, we find humans buried with their dogs, often with grave goods, showing affection and social status. Dogs were prestige companions, indicators of trustworthiness and generosity. Think of it this way. If you could feed an extra mouth that wasn't even human, you were clearly doing well. Owning a dog said, I can share food and still survive. In evolutionary psychology, that's called a flex. So yes, the guy with a dog gets more dates trope has been working for 16,000 years. Back then, the dating profile was just a fur pelt, a fire, and a wolf that didn't bite your face off. Dogs weren't just pets. They were social currency, a walking status symbol, and an early filter for empathy. Civilization didn't just need food and shelter. It needed companionship. And dogs made us practice it first. Fast forward to around 10,000 BCE. Humans settle down. Agriculture begins in the Fertile Crescent. And who's still here? Dogs. They've evolved alongside us. Smaller, more obedient, capable of understanding gestures and commands. Dogs become farm managers before spreadsheets existed. They guard granaries, chase pests, and help herd sheep and goats, long before we invented fences. Genetic studies show that early herding breeds likely developed in Central Asia and the Middle East, adapting to human agriculture. Meanwhile, cats show up later, uninvited, just to judge everyone. Dogs are literally building the infrastructure of civilization, while cats are freelancing in pest control for exposure. This partnership reshaped both species. Dogs evolved to read human emotions. Humans evolved to find puppy eyes irresistible. We basically bred ourselves into emotional codependence. Farming wasn't just about crops. It was about cooperation. And dogs were the first co-workers who didn't unionize. By 3000 BCE, the relationship gets spiritual. In ancient Egypt, dogs weren't just helpers. They were sacred. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and the afterlife, represented loyalty and protection. Egyptians believed dogs guided souls safely to the next world. The original good boy behavior. Archaeologists have found mass canine cemeteries at sites like Saqqara, with hundreds of thousands of mummified dogs and jackals. Some were offerings to Anubis, others were beloved pets buried with honors. In tomb art, dogs appear beside hunters and nobles, wearing collars, status symbols of wealth and affection. And unlike cats, who got temples and memes, dogs got promoted to divine functionaries. They didn't demand worship. They earned it. So while humans were still figuring out how to irrigate the Nile, dogs had already infiltrated religion, politics, and fashion. The phrase, "man's best friend," doesn't even do it justice. In ancient Egypt, dogs were God's interns. Welcome to ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, geometry, and men arguing in bedsheets. Here, dogs weren't just pets. They were metaphors. Enter Diogenes of Sinope, 4th century BCE. Philosopher, professional menace, and the man literally known as the dog. Why? Because he lived like one. He rejected wealth, lived in a barrel, begged for food, and barked at hypocrisy. When asked why he was called a dog, he said, "I fawn on those who give, I bark at those who don't, and I bite the wicked." Basically, the Socrates of sarcasm. The Greek word kynikos, dog-like, gave us cynic. That's right. Every time someone says, "I'm just a little cynical," they're quoting a man who pooped in public to prove a point. But Diogenes wasn't alone. Dogs were everywhere in Greek life, hunting, guarding, and starring in myths. The Molossian hound was legendary, loyal, massive, and probably capable of scaring off philosophers mid-debate. Socrates even praised dogs for their sense of justice, claiming they could distinguish friend from foe better than most humans. So if civilization needed a mascot for rational thought, it wasn't the owl of Athena. It was a slightly drooling, philosophically enlightened dog. By the time Rome takes over, dogs have gone corporate. The Romans loved structure, aqueducts, legions, and apparently dog breeds. They classified dogs by job: Canis pugnax for war, Canis venaticus for hunting, and tiny lapdogs called Melite, the ancestors of modern Maltese. Mosaics across Pompeii warn visitors with the iconic phrase, "Cave canem," beware of dog. Fun fact, those weren't just about security. They were humble brags. a Roman way of saying, "Look, even my dog has real estate." Dogs accompanied soldiers into battle, carried messages, and guarded villas. In literature, they symbolized loyalty. In art, they symbolized affection. One Roman tomb inscription reads, "To Helena, my little dog, who never barked without reason." That's the ancient version of a heartfelt pet memorial post. Romans also practiced selective breeding on an imperial scale. The reason we have mastiffs, greyhounds, and toy breeds today. If you think modern influencers love showing off their pets, imagine Emperor Augustus parading purebred hunting dogs as political flexes. Rome may have fallen, but the empire of good boys marched on. The Middle Ages were weird, and dogs made them weirder. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, Europe held actual trials for animals. Dogs, pigs, and even rats were given lawyers. Sometimes they were executed with dignity. In 1457, a sow and her piglets were tried in France for killing a child. The mother was hanged, the piglets were acquitted. Justice was medieval, and everyone needed therapy. But dogs weren't just defendants. They were knights too. Nobles gifted each other warhounds trained for combat. The Alaunt, a massive dog breed from Central Asia, became the tank of medieval battlefields. Chronicles mention dogs wearing armor, charging alongside cavalry, and occasionally outranking peasants. Saint Roch, patron of the plague-stricken, was said to be kept alive by a loyal dog bringing him bread. Monks later declared that dog a symbol of divine mercy, the original emotional support animal. Medieval Europe gave us castles, cathedrals, and canine chivalry. Half courtroom drama, half battlefield chaos. And dogs were somehow involved in both. Fast forward to the age of exploration, roughly the 15th to 19th centuries. Every human expedition that mattered had dogs in tow. Why? Because dogs could do what humans couldn't: survive, sniff, and shut up when necessary. Vikings brought Spitz-type dogs on ships to hunt and guard. Archaeological finds in Greenland confirm Norse dogs buried with their owners around 1000 CE. Spanish conquistadors weaponized mastiffs like Beccarillo and Leoncio, war dogs that terrified entire armies in the Americas. Brutal, yes, but historically real. Later, Arctic explorers relied entirely on sled dogs. When Roald Amundsen reached the South Pole in 1911, he did it thanks to his Greenland Huskies. Meanwhile, Captain Scott, who used ponies instead, froze to death. Morale of the story: never underestimate a good boy in the snow. Dogs crossed deserts with Bedouins, climbed mountains with explorers, and hunted in jungles before we had GPS. They were the first true adventurers, and they never demanded credit. Just snacks. Now we hit the Renaissance, a time of art, science, and people wearing hats so big they needed architectural permits. Dogs, of course, were in the middle of it all. Portraits by Titian, Van Eyck, and Holbein show nobles with tiny lapdogs at their feet, living proof of wealth and refinement. Queen Elizabeth II adored her spaniels. Henry VIII imported hunting hounds from France, and Catherine de' Medici bred Italian greyhounds, small enough to fit inside sleeves. The church debated whether dogs had souls. Spoiler, yes, but only the cute ones, apparently. Meanwhile, scientists like Leonardo da Vinci sketched dogs' anatomy alongside flying machines, proving the Renaissance valued both curiosity and good boys. By the 1600s, elite dogs had servants, jewelry, and even mini coffins. One noble in France left a pension to his poodle. His children got nothing. It was peak drama. Painters immortalized dogs in oil, nobles weaponized them for status, and peasants kept mutts that actually worked for a living. Civilization was getting fancier, but dogs were still running the show. The 18th and 19th centuries were loud, smoky, and dangerous. perfect conditions for dogs to shine. As factories rose and steam engines screamed, dogs became the blue-collar heroes of progress. In England and the Netherlands, turn-spit dogs literally ran on hamster wheel-like machines to rotate meat over fires. Yes, humanity built industrial machinery powered by cardio dogs. They were the first energy workers, underpaid, overworked, and adorable. Meanwhile, in mining towns, dogs hauled coal carts, carried messages through tunnels, and guarded supply lines. In London, fire dogs were trained to pull water pumps and rescue victims. Newspapers in the 1800s celebrated these dogs like celebrities. One was even buried with a fireman's medal. In Switzerland, St. Bernards saved stranded travelers in the Alps. One famous rescue dog, Barry, saved over 40 people and got his own statue in Paris. While humans were inventing capitalism, dogs were out there inventing heroism. They weren't just man's best friend anymore. They were man's unpaid labor union. Now it's the 20th century. Industrialization turns into global chaos. 2 world wars erupt, and dogs enlist again. In World War I, they delivered messages across deadly trenches, carried medical supplies, and located wounded soldiers. The most famous, Sergeant Stubby, a Boston Terrier mix, served in 17 battles, survived gas attacks, and even captured a German spy by biting his leg. The U.S. Army gave him a uniform and medals, technically making him America's most decorated canine. In World War II, dogs parachuted behind enemy lines, sniffed out mines, and guarded camps. Soviet forces trained anti-tank dogs. British forces used collies and retrievers as scouts. Even Hitler had a beloved German shepherd named Blondie. Though unsurprisingly, he was terrible at keeping friends alive. After the wars, nations built canine units for police and rescue work. The bond that began in a frozen camp 30,000 years ago was now official government policy. Civilization's armies rose and fell, but the dogs stayed loyal to humanity's chaos. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Laika, a stray from Moscow's streets, aboard Sputnik 2. She became the first living creature to orbit Earth, a symbol of progress, sacrifice, and questionable consent. Laika's mission was never meant to return. Soviet scientists later admitted they had no plan to bring her back alive. Yet her flight proved that mammals could survive space conditions, paving the way for human astronauts. Without Laika, there is no Yuri Gagarin, no Apollo 11, no Elon Musk tweeting about Mars. The irony? The first being to circle the planet wasn't a man seeking glory. It was a street dog chasing humanity's biggest dream. Her statue now stands in Moscow. No words, just a dog in a tiny space helmet, looking like she owns the cosmos. So yes, dogs not only helped build civilization, they left it. Today, dogs run a global empire worth over $200 billion. They have luxury spas, organic diets, and Instagram followers in the millions. Humans went from domesticators to personal assistants. There are dog hotels, dog therapists, dog DNA kits. Some cities now have more dog parks than schools. In Japan, robotic dogs get funerals. In Los Angeles, real dogs have agents. Science backs up the madness. MRI scans show that dogs recognize human faces and process voices emotionally. They don't just pretend to love you. They actually do. But that love has been monetized. Civilization's greatest emotional achievement has become its most profitable subscription service. And yet, beneath all the absurdity, the bond is real. The creature that once shared our fire now shares our Wi-Fi. Here's the punchline. Humans didn't civilize dogs. Dogs civilized humans. They taught us cooperation before language, loyalty before law, and empathy before religion. They protected us from predators, helped us farm, explored with us, fought beside us, and even died for our ambitions. Every empire, every monument, every ridiculous invention, all built under the watch of a creature who just wanted snacks and approval. Without dogs, maybe we'd still be grunting in caves. With them, we built cities, art, philosophy, and memes. So yeah, dogs didn't invent civilization on purpose. They just showed up hungry, and we never stopped feeding them. And that's how dogs went from Ice Age scavengers to the architects of modern humanity, one bark at a time. If you enjoyed this historical tailwag, subscribe to Ancient Absurdity, where we turn history's weirdest truths into comedy with a PhD in chaos. Give this video a like before your dog does it for you, and let us know in the comments which historical dog deserves its own movie. Next time you look into those puppy eyes, remember, you're not the owner. You're the intern in an ancient 30,000-year partnership, and you're still paying in treats.